Few ocean liners have the same notoriety as the SS Andrea Doria, and its place in Italian maritime history stands as a spottier moment on the timeline. Italy's history seems to be entirely comprised of spottier moments. With that in mind, I'm not going to pretend none of us know what happens in the end. From the ancient traders of Venice that accidentally killed half of Europe, to the Phoenicians who got assaulted by the Romans, Italy has had numerous nautical escapades. You may think giant Italian ships sinking is a new trend. You'd be wrong. Italy after World War II. They're in a bit of a weird spot. They decide to make it weirder by ditching their monarchy. Now, compared to nations like Germany and Britain, Italy's ocean liner industry had always been in a solid third, fourth, actually fifth place. Like I said, they're in a weird spot, and other than half their industry being totally obliterated, their reputation resting peacefully in the toilet, and their economy falling flat on its face, Italy was doing alright for themselves. The pre-war national pride Italians felt had been decimated, and its new leaders wanted something for the Italian people to be proud of. The Allies wouldn't let them be proud of their victories in World War II, and even if they did, it's not like there were too many to be proud of. So I presume they threw at a dartboard and hit ship, because the Italians chose to build a large luxury liner that would symbolize Italian culture and magnificence. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. I'm pretty sure President Luigi, didn't care much about a new ocean liner. Besides, their ocean liners always seemed to be a gamble. In the past, Italy's ships ranged from great successes to sinking immediately upon launch. Finally, a ship with a worse career than the Titanic. In the early 1950s, the Italian line officially commissioned two new vessels, called the SS Andrea Doria, named for a Genoese admiral from the 1500s, and the SS Cristoforo Colombo, named after some mean Italian explorer. Now, the Italian line at this point had realized that although transatlantic voyages were very profitable, the fledgling cruise industry was worth something of its own. Cruises had been around for a while, but now was the first time it was really starting to pick up the pace. The Italian line investing in this was very ahead of the curve. With that in mind, this new class would have a huge emphasis on luxury. However, the Andrea Doria was still not going to be the largest ship in the world. That was the Queen Elizabeth. No ideas yet. But it would certainly be the largest ship in Italy. Much of this space would be used for her grand accommodations, possibly her most notable features. Now, I hope over these mini videos I've produced, you've grown to dislike modern architecture at least a little bit. But at this point, if I go on another rant about it, the point is probably moot. Yes, the Andrea Doria had modern interiors characteristic of the era. It's been stated her first class was unbelievably luxurious. I even read somewhere that it was called the most luxurious ship of all time. That means the Titanic is even sadder. However, the Andrea Doria's modern interiors were mostly overshadowed by her expansive collection of artwork. Paintings, murals, and tapestries earned her the nickname the Floating Art Gallery. A large statue of Admiral Andrea Doria was located in the first class and remained one of her more prominent features. Her art styles were kind of all over the place. Some Renaissance style, some modern art, some sculptures. It was about as consistent as my upload schedule. Her modern interiors were still well liked among her passengers, and even third class had some pretty sweet accommodations. She wasn't a purpose-built immigrant ship, but was very popular among immigrants nonetheless. All three classes had their own outdoor pool, with first class on the Lido deck, I'm not even going to try to pronounce things correctly anymore, cabin class on the boat deck, and tourist class on the promenade deck. Now, these deck titles may sound a bit confusing because a lot of us are used to the standard lettering system, but Andrea Doria's decks were a bit different. From top to bottom, they are as follows: the Belvedere deck, the Sun deck, the Lido deck, the boat deck, the promenade deck, the upper deck, the foyer deck, A deck, B deck, C deck, and cargo. She had the capacity to hold 218 first class, 320 cabin class, and 703 tourist class passengers. A very reasonable number considering her size and a good amount of passengers to be profitable. Andrea Doria's construction was a huge deal at the time. It was to be the first post-war ocean liner for Italy. In 1951, the New York Times described it as, quote, "Towering almost 100 feet above the suburb of Sestri Ponente, the 637-foot-long hull is visible for miles, and the red bottom, surmounted by many feet of black painted steel, lends color to this otherwise drab and dreary part of Genoa's port, from which the new flyer, flying the flag of the Italian line, will depart regularly next year. A visit to this birthplace of such famous ships such as the Rex, the Roma, and the Augustus, well remembered in pre-war days, is a noisy one." I'm almost certain this author was slipped $20 by the Italian line, or else he may have an abnormal attraction to ships. Based on my comments section, he wouldn't be the first one. On June 26, 1951, the Andrea Doria was blessed by His Eminence Cardinal Siri, Archbishop of Genoa, and then christened and launched by Signora Giuseppina Saragat, wife of the former minister of the Italian Merchant Marine. Her fitting out went a tad longer than expected, but she was on her engine trials by November of 1952, when it was discovered she was having a bit of mechanical trouble, delaying her maiden voyage from December to January. It was also discovered that rolling would be a significant problem for the ship, especially when her fuel tanks were low or her cargo holds were empty. This could cause her to list significantly, but we'll get back to that. Not a great start, but once she really got her career going, it was nothing but smooth sailing. In fact, on her maiden voyage, she encountered an intense gale that could have done significant damage. She even listed a whole 28 degrees, but in the end, she was only delayed by a few minutes for her arrival in New York. This is legendary timing and on par with reliability of ships like the SS United States. Andrea Doria would sail all the way until 1956. That's 322 times as long as the Titanic sailed, and had great financial success for her line along with her now complete sister. Now, I wanted to go more in depth on her career, but everything I've read just skips straight to her sinking. Andrea Doria left Genoa for a standard trip on Tuesday, July 17, 1956, with 1,134 passengers on board before she hit the Atlantic. She arrived in Cannes, France, the same day to pick up some more people, before heading south to Naples. She made her last stop in Gibraltar before finally departing Europe to head west. Out of New York appeared a small 12,165 gross registered ton Swedish-American liner called the SS Stockholm, heading eastbound for Sweden. In order to save time, the Stockholm was sailing 12 miles north of the standard eastbound shipping lane. This put the Andrea Doria right en route for a head-on collision. And naturally, Mother Nature turned on the fog machine for dramatic effect, in addition to the whole going to collide thing. Now, they don't know where the other is. As it turns out, a mistake on the Andrea Doria's radar resulted in the vessel not changing course until it was too late. Both ships had been sounding their foghorn. However, when the Stockholm appeared, it was abundantly clear what was coming. The Stockholm. She swerved to starboard but inevitably hit, and the vessels collided at a near 90-degree angle. Now here's the thing about the Stockholm. Sweden's pretty far up north. This is not news. That means, or at least that meant, there was a possibility of ships having to sail through ice. This is why the bow of the Stockholm was designed specifically to have ice-breaking capabilities. This was unfortunate for the Andrea Doria, which was hit while maintaining normal speed. The Stockholm pierced through Foyer Deck Luxury Suite 180, and instantly the even cabins from 202 to 238 were smashed to bits. The automobile hold was located on B deck, and numerous cars were destroyed in the collision, including a priceless Chrysler Norseman, a prototype car that ended up never being produced. 2 watertight bulkheads were also crunched in the collision, and huge amounts of water began flooding onto B deck. Remarkably, it would take 12 hours for the ship to go down. Congratulations, you did the bare minimum function of a ship, remaining afloat. Alright, now remember when I said the Andrea Doria tended to list and roll when her fuel tanks were low? Well, she's at the end of her voyage, and she began listing very soon after the collision. She listed over 20 degrees to starboard, meaning half her lifeboats couldn't be launched. This, however, isn't that much of a concern, as the Stockholm, not really in any immediate danger, lowered her lifeboats to assist with the evacuation. As time marched on, ships began to react to Andrea Doria's SOS call, and soon the enormous liner SS Ile-de-France arrived, providing not only a huge number of lifeboats, great accommodations for survivors, but an enormous morale boost by having the sheer size and lights of the vessel providing a comforting view that truly made survivors feel safe. It was like a whole floating city came to save them. It felt almost like a triumph of humanity. In the end, 51 people died, 5 from the Stockholm and 46 from the Andrea Doria, mostly from the collision. Today, the Andrea Doria rests 160 feet below the Atlantic. It's nicknamed the Mount Everest for scuba divers because of the challenge traveling through her. Her superstructure has collapsed now, so it's even harder. A few people have even died exploring the wreck. Now, as for the Stockholm, she's doing alright for herself. In the 90s, she was converted into a cruise ship and still sails to this day, now under the name MV Astoria. So what did we learn? The Andrea Doria's story may not seem very influential today, but she certainly set a trend for Italian ships to sink.